I find out my sister-in-law, well, her marriage is basically falling apart, but she doesn't know it yet because I am the very first one to discover that her husband is a cheater. I found the evidence right there on his cell phone. I didn't mean to do it. I was innocently coming back to get my husband's drink that he left on the table when I saw, well, all his phone text messages going off about all these girls that he's messaging, and the biggest one of all, it turns out to be somebody that my sister-in-law knows very closely, none other than her best friend, sending very illicit pictures right there to my sister-in-law's husband. Well, guys, it turns out my sister-in-law finds out about the affair before I have the chance to tell her and show her the evidence, and guess what she does? She runs into the room screaming at me, accusing me of being the one who's the mistress. Well, sorry girl, I have to ruin your day even more because I'm going to show you the evidence that proves it wasn't me, it was in fact your best friend.
Hey everyone, you can call me Rachel. This is going to be a long one, so bear with me. I've got a lot of background info for you. First, let me tell you a bit about my sister-in-law Jane and her husband Gerald. Jane is my husband Arnie's sister. She's a nice girl and she means well, but she's always been a bit ditzy. There's no nicer way to put it. That being said, she's got a heart of gold and she'll do anything to help anybody, especially if she cares about you. Frankly, it's her willingness to help others and live a selfless existence that's landed her in this situation, which I'll get into shortly. Anyways, Jane's been utterly obsessed with her new husband Gerald ever since they got married about a year ago. I understand some newlywed excitement, it's normal to be in love, after all, but geez, it seems like you can't have a conversation with Jane anymore without hearing about Gerald. If you ask her what color the sky was, she would have to say what Gerald thought first. It's hard to figure out where Jane ends and Gerald begins, so to speak. As for my husband, Arnie, well, he's had a bad feeling about Gerald from the moment he laid eyes upon him, and I've had a funny feeling about him as well. Plus, even if we did not have odd feelings about Gerald, just the sheer level of attachment Jane has for the guy is textbook unhealthy. But me and Arnie have been having bad feelings about Gerald. It's not enough to get the family talking. He's a handsome, charismatic guy, and from what I can tell, me and my husband are the only ones in the family who don't absolutely love Gerald. So, me and Arnie have always thought it was for the best to just keep our mouths shut on the topic. Sure, Jane can be annoying when all she talks about's Gerald, but I figure it's not my place or even my husband's place to lend our opinion and possibly cause drama. Well, as you might have guessed by the fact that I'm posting this for you all here today, life has a way of forcing you into a drama even when you've done everything you can to avoid it. So, Jane and Gerald had organized a family gathering. Everything was going smoothly, but there was an awkward vibe in the air. Me and my husband had been discussing it in private when suddenly, Gerald came walking around the corner on his cell phone. He was a bit rude to me and Arnie, so we got the hint that he wanted us to move and decided that we would be the best course of action. After quietly talking about how rude and off-putting Gerald always seemed to be towards us, my husband mentioned that he'd forgotten his drink. I told him not to worry and decided I'd go get the drink myself. That was when I saw what I would get all this drama started with. Sitting right there on the counter next to my drink was Gerald's unattended cell phone. I normally would never go through another person's stuff, but the way the phone was placed next to my drink, it's almost as if I felt Gerald wanted to be caught. On his cell phone screen was a series of flirtatious messages between Gerald and some unnamed woman. I could see a revealing photograph, but the face was covered, so I could not quite make out the individual. One thing I knew that was for certain was that the woman on Gerald's phone was indeed not Jane. I knew I had to act quickly if I wanted to get this evidence without getting caught. Who knows what Gerald would be willing to do if he caught me? This was proof that he had multiple sides. Part of me felt vindicated that my and Arnie's suspicion towards Gerald had been correct. But when I thought of Jane, you see, Jane is so in love with Gerald. What do I do with this information? In a bit of desperation, I decided to pull out my cell phone and take a picture of what was on Gerald's phone. I didn't have time to forward the message to myself. Instead of getting an entire conversation, I only had a chunk of a conversation, but this small chunk was all I needed to incriminate Gerald. Suddenly, Gerald came walking by the corner and said, "What are you doing with my cell phone?" I explained that I was simply getting my drink, and then I told Gerald I had not even noticed his cell phone, and I could tell by the distrusting look in his eyes that he believed me about as far as he could throw me. I quickly scurried off because, frankly, Gerald's disappointed and disdainful glare was starting to burn a hole in me. I quickly flagged down my husband. I explained why I had been gone for so long, and I showed Arnie the picture I've taken off Gerald's phone. He said the evidence was clear as day, but how could we tell Jane? I told him that's why I had come to him. We both knew that Jane was hopelessly in love with Gerald, and we both knew that breaking the news of this affair would not be easy. We didn't even have an entire conversation. We just had a small part of it. And it wasn't even an actual screenshot. I had in my possession a grainy cell phone photograph taken of someone else's cell phone conversation, yet the evidence was still as clear as day. It was indisputably Gerald engaging in unfaithful behavior with a woman who was not Jane. Yet we both knew that Jane could just easily say that we faked the photograph just to, quote, tear her perfect marriage apart. The possibilities for things going wrong were endless, and me and Arnie decided we were going to wait until after the family gathering to give the news to ease the humiliation and pain. What happened immediately afterwards was mind-boggling. Just as me and Arnie were walking back in the main living area, Jane comes storming into the room and announces that she knows Gerald is cheating on her. I initially felt a sense of relief wash over me, for I no longer had the need to tell Jane what was even happening. But that's when she turned and pointed to me. What she said next made my jaw hit the floor, and Jane pointed at me and said that I was Gerald's mistress. What? I was frozen solid, and I could hear the commotion of the crowd growing and growing fierce. That's when I knew I had to reveal the truth, no matter how much it would hurt Jane. So I showed Jane the photo evidence of Gerald's infidelity, complete with the image of the mysterious woman, and Jane began to sob. And things only spiraled from there. Jane revealed to me, and Arnie, that she had actually just pulled my name out of thin air in an act of desperation. She said that she had noticed a lot of suspicious behavior from Gerald over the past couple of months, but had been sweeping all of her fears under the rug. She explained that she was so in love with Gerald and in denial about what was right there in front of her. All this was transpiring in front of their entire family, and I knew it had to be embarrassing and traumatic for Jane. But then, things just kept getting worse for Jane. Her cell phone rang, and she answered when she saw it was Gerald calling. I could not quite hear what Gerald was saying on the other end, but I could see by the look on Jane's face and her reaction afterwards that the news was not good. Jane began sobbing hysterically. After a straight minute of sobbing, I was finally able to ask Jane what happened. She gave us all the news that Gerald had already left the country with some unnamed woman. Well, he said he was taking away everything. The credit cards, the allowances, the luxuries, every little perk he had granted Jane was being swept away in an instant. To sit there and watch as her entire world and lifestyle were taken from her, it was so heartbreaking. So I sit here writing all this for you today for a reason. I need advice. Guys, first, I just feel responsible for all of this that happened, to be honest. Perhaps my meddling with Gerald's cell phone was the, sign for this grand exit and all this drama. I know I should not blame myself for the failing marriage of others, but I feel so bad for Jane. I wanted to help her in some way, and I wanted to get revenge on this clown, Gerald. Me and Arnie have always known that Gerald is a jerk, and we wanted every single person to know about it too. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Oh man, so it looks like OP is stuck in a pickle in the middle of a failing marriage, and well, it's not her marriage that she's worried about. I do have multiple updates for you guys today. I hope everyone's enjoying their day so far. If you guys want to help support the channel, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button underneath this video right now. Thank you so much for that, guys. Let's jump into update number 1. Hey everyone, I'm back with an update. First, I'd like to thank every one of you who left the kind and supportive comments and thoughtful advice. We all really appreciate it, and with all the drama unfolding, it's nice to have a place where I can finally vent. I wish I could say things are getting better, but they aren't. Gerald's still missing as I type this, and he actually had the nerve to send me and Arnie a letter by mail. There's no return address, of course, so there doesn't appear to be any way to track the letter. If any of you have suggestions for how we could track a letter origin, feel free to let me know. I'm starting to think Gerald might not actually be outside the country, but is instead trying to make us think he is outside the country. And to make matters worse, the letter Gerald sent us is, well, full of threats. He says me and Arnie will be sorry that we kept looking for him, and he says Jane is better off without him. Well, I agree with him on that one, but that does not absolve him from injustice. As for Jane, she's not doing much better either. The grief process will take time, and I think she's consumed by denial, anger, and a host of other strong emotions. Me and Arnie are letting her stay at our house because Gerald callously and coldly changed the locks on their home. Jane can't even get back inside to get a hold of her own belongings. That's the type of immoral jerk we're dealing with when it comes to Gerald. And to be honest with you guys, I just don't know how he was able to pull the wool over Jane's eyes for so darn long. One thing is definitely for sure. It won't be much longer until Gerald gets his comeuppance. You can't go around threatening and harassing people, let alone cheating on them in the process, and expect to just keep getting away with it. Nope, not on my watch. Again, I want to say thank you everybody for the kind words for so far, and if anyone has advice on how you would go about figuring out where Gerald is, feel free, let us know. Updates number 2. Hey everybody, I'm back with yet another update. Gerald's still been sending harassing letters. Hey, it doesn't bother me, each piece is just part of the mountain of evidence I'm building. You see, I took some of your advice, and I got it from the last update. A lot of you were telling me, go ahead and look into hiring a private investigator. I understand they can come in handy across cases like this. There's a local private investigator who's infamous in small towns. He's even made it to television, being featured in a few high-profile local cases. His name is Thompson. Thompson is very cutthroat, ruthless type of investigator who you call when you want to get things done. Me and Arnie called Thompson and explained the details of the case. We showed him the photo I've taken of the messages between Gerald and the mysterious mistress and the revealing photograph. And we showed Thompson all the letters that we've been getting from Gerald. He took one look at the letters and immediately knew that they were not from outside of the country. Thompson explained that while he was not yet able to prove it, he would be able to figure out exactly where the letters were coming from very soon. Me and Arnie knew that Gerald was a coward, so we weren't surprised by this at all, but it still did not quite make much sense. Guys, do any of you have any guesses as to why Gerald would be pretending to be outside of the country? I guess he's scared of the impending divorce, I don't know. I bet court is not going to look pretty for Gerald once we track him down and Jane gets herself a lawyer. Thompson also pointed out one interesting fact. If Gerald were really in another country, there would be no way for the letters to arrive so quickly at my house. Duh. Soon we shall catch him. Jane deserves to see this guy get what he deserves. Update Number 3. Hey people, Rachel here, back again for yet another update, and things just keep getting juicier and juicier. I wish I could say for your sake, my sake, and Jane's sake that this was all getting wrapped up, but things just keep getting crazier. So if you've been following along so far, you'll know that I and Arnie have hired the local private investigator Thompson to help us track down Gerald. Ever since my last update, Gerald's still leaving letters at our doorstep, even threatening us and telling us to stop looking for him. Thompson was actually able to immediately figure out that the letters were not coming from outside of the country, but he also uncovered some very juicy information on top of that. He called me and Arnie earlier today and told us to stop by his office. We knew it must be important if he wanted us to show up in person instead of just telling us about it on the phone. First, let me give you all some background information. Jane's best friend is Diane. Well, if Diane is Jane's best friend, you might ask, where has she been throughout this whole debacle with Gerald and the mistress? Exactly. This whole time, Jane's been wondering where Diane is. You see, Diane's been telling Jane that she's out of town and will be back soon. That's part of the reason Jane has been staying at our house. Normally, when Jane is in a time of distress or great need, she would be staying at Diane's house. Diane is not around for a reason, apparently. Thompson produced photographs that proved without a shadow of a doubt that not only is Gerald not out of the country, but he's also still in our same small town, and not only is Gerald in our small town with his mistress, but his mistress happens to be no other than Diane. All the evidence was there. Photograph after photograph. I mean, it was a wonder none of us had seen Gerald yet. He was all over town with Diane. Me and Arnie thanked Thompson for his help, and we collected all the evidence, and now things were about to get even more difficult. It was bad enough dealing with the distraught Jane, who just found out her husband was cheating on her, but now she was about to find out she lost both her best friend and her husband. Me and Arnie aren't sure how we're going to break the news to her. That's part of why I'm typing this for you all today. You see, how can I break the news to Jane? I feel awful, and now I'm even more certain than before that only the language Gerald will be able to understand is the language of revenge. Update number 4. Hey everyone, I'm back for yet another update. I took your advice and tried to lay it on Jane easily, but it wasn't as easy to do. I mean, let's face it, there's no nice and pleasant way to find out your husband's cheating on you with your best friend. Me and Arnie called Jane into the living room and told her to sit down. I think she could sense something was going to go very wrong. We gave her the news that her best friend Diane was in fact Gerald's mistress, and Jane sobbed uncontrollably. She didn't want to believe us at first, but we showed her some of the Polaroid photos Thompson had given us. Jane finally accepted the truth. Until then, she had been somewhat holding out hope that this was merely a fling or merely a case of Gerald having a midlife crisis, but once Jane saw the pictures of Gerald and Diane sharing milkshakes and doing other romantic things, she knew once and for all that her marriage was over. Me and Arnie gave her the necessary time to sit and grieve, but then Jane surprised us all. She asked, and I quote, "When are we getting revenge?" Since we had proof that Gerald was in town, I proposed that we hire a lawyer and sue him. The way I see it, all these pictures of the text and the meetings with Diane combined with a sudden ruse to make it seem like he was in a different country tell us Gerald was likely trying to avoid a legitimate divorce in court. I think if we can get Thompson in the courtroom with us and all of us prepare a coherent argument, we can take down Gerald and Diane so easily. I explained all of this to Arnie and Jane, and they actually agreed. Wish me luck, guys. We were talking to each other a moment ago and realized something. Interesting, too. A nice little social media campaign might be a great way to get Gerald's attention. That would definitely be a great way for him to find out about his impending trip to divorce court. Updates number 5. This is the final update. Hello everyone. Sorry it's been some time since my last update. I'm back for one more. I just wanted to wrap things up for you since I've been getting so many comments asking what happened. Me and Arnie arranged for a court summons to get Gerald right where we wanted him. Me and Jane began posting about Gerald and Diane's affair, after all, of the social medias. And funny enough, once his reputation was on the line, he actually started to listen. Now, our entire small town was gossiping and chit-chatting right there about Gerald's affairs. Gerald cares so much about his public image that I know it must have driven him crazy. Gerald and Diane were ordered to attend divorce court, and Thompson acted as part of our defense. He was able to successfully argue that Gerald likely skipped town with the intention of absconding divorce court proceedings. Obviously, Gerald had a vested interest in avoiding court because he knew his assets would be on the line if he attended court proceedings. I showed the photographic evidence of the text between Gerald and the mystery woman, and Thompson was able to prove through his own photographs that the mistress was indeed Diane. Nothing at this point looked good for Gerald or Diane, in fact, and the final nail in the coffin was simply Jane's testimony herself. She recalled all the suspicious moments she ignored, and she spoke of the manipulation she had experienced right there at Gerald's hands. The courtroom could see just how dedicated and devoted Jane had been, and Gerald had thrown it all away. Gerald only dug his grave deeper when he tried telling her room how he should not have to deal with Jane. He said that Jane loved him too much and that he was only trying to, quote, make things easier on her by hiding his infidelity from her and simply pretending to take off to live in some foreign country. Well, I'll tell you right now, this did not win him any favors in the crowd. Even Diane appeared embarrassed and straight up defeated. The room went cold with silence, and the judge prepared to read the verdict. Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that things went as well as you possibly could have thought. The judge ordered Gerald and Diane to do full-time community service for a while to help raise debts to pay off the pain and suffering that they caused Jane. Gerald's assets were awarded to Jane because of the cruelty of his affair. As for me, well, I'm doing well. Me and Arnie were doing really well, and we're very close to Jane and her new boyfriend. I and Arnie both have good feelings about this one. Thank you for reading and giving me so many kind words.
Alright, so it was obvious on this one. Gerald, well, he was a piece of work. I mean, what was he thinking? We know how the story ended, but what was Gerald even going on in his mind? First of all, he lied, saying he was out of the country. Second of all, he was staying at his mistress's house right there in town, which turned out to be OP's sister-in-law's absolute best friend. I mean, how low can you go? So now we find out OP's sister-in-law not only lost her husband, but she lost her best friend too. The only good thing that came out of this story is at the very end, it looks like Gerald and sister-in-law's best friend lose their job. So that is one good plus to this story, but I would love to hear what you guys think about Diane and Gerald, because in my opinion, and also the commenters, they can all agree that they are vile, toxic human beings, and they don't care about the emotions of OP. They don't care about the emotions of Jane, Arnie, none of them. They could care less. So guys, let me hear your thoughts about this one. You can drop it directly below in the comment section. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do want more daily videos, just know, Mr. Reddito posts every single day, and we cover so many topics. I mean, topics like today, which are sister-in-law dramas, best friend affairs, mother-in-law disputes, which are hands down my favorite because you never know what you're going to expect. And also another fan favorite is inheritance dramas. It seems like there's a lot of those going around. So guys, let me know your thoughts about this story in the comment section. Make sure you subscribe for daily videos. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and just remember one thing. It's cool to be kind. See ya.